Hello, I'm Chuck Grainger with Grainger Legal Services. We're a consumer advocacy firm and a bankruptcy firm with offices in Montgomery, Prattville, and Troy, Alabama. If you're watching this video, you're trying to find out if you've been robbing Peter to pay Paul, and now Peter wants his money. What can Peter do about it? And that's a very serious question. People don't think about what Peter can do until they find out that Peter wants his money. And when you get into that situation, it usually takes steps that it goes through before it gets into your pocketbook, whether you like it or not. And that's the thing. They can actually force you to pay them in certain ways. At first, when you get behind, because inevitably you will get behind if you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, that's a cycle that goes back and forth until it gets out of hand. But when you do get behind, then you start getting collection calls. Sometimes these things will be referred to collection agencies that'll hit your credit report and hurt your credit. But whether they do or not, you get these calls and they harass you. Some people will give in to that and they'll pay even if it means they don't take their medicine because they can't afford their medicine that month or something. They get behind on a car loan. Something will happen that forces them to pay, and it's that pressure that they put on people when they call and harass them. They will sometimes call your relatives or your neighbors. They'll find out where you live and they'll start calling around. You know where they are, they're not answering the phone. Harassment is one of the things that leads people to come see me for some sort of relief. But it can get more serious than just harassment. The next phase that they can go through, if they're not able to get their money by trying to write you letters and call you and harass you, then they can still sue you. Now, what a lot of people I talk to don't understand what a lawsuit is and what that means. And so I'm going to explain it in this video. In a lawsuit, the creditor, the people you owe money to, will file papers with the county and they will sue you in court. It's a lawsuit. And you have so much time, either 14 days or 30 days, to file an answer in that case. Most people do not file an answer in that case. Most of the time they don't understand what it is. They don't really understand what their legal rights are. And most people who are behind on their bills are living in a form of denial. They're not really dealing with it. And so lawsuits force you to deal with the situation even if you're not willing to deal with it. And so a lawsuit happens, it gets filed, you have 14 or 30 days, depending on how much money it is you owe them, to answer it. 14 days isn't much time. The clock starts running when you get served with the papers. Maybe the sheriff will show up at your home, maybe the sheriff will show up where you work, and they will serve you with papers showing you that you've been sued. Then if you've got 14 days to file an answer and you don't, the creditor can get what's called a default judgment, meaning you defaulted on answering the lawsuit, so they win the lawsuit. Okay, so the judge agrees with them. The judge issues an order, which is a piece of paper that says, yeah, you owe them the money. So what happens after that? And that's an important question, because some people I talk to are judgment proof. And that means that the creditors can harass them and they can sue them, but they still cannot get their money. So I'm going to tell you what judgment proof is, so that if you're not judgment proof, as I go through these 4 things that creditors can do to you, you'll be able to evaluate whether you need some sort of help. Okay? First thing they can do is garnish your paycheck, 25%. First, they take out the federal and state taxes, the Social Security and Medicare, and then what's left, they get 25% of it. Most people cannot live on 3/4 of a paycheck. And in fact, that problem sometimes causes employers not to hire people. If they think they're going to get garnished at work, a lot of people will quit their jobs and try and work under the table to avoid that. And so employers don't want to invest in hiring and training somebody that's going to quit on them. So that's a problem. But garnishment of a paycheck is probably the #1 way that creditors will attempt to collect on a judgment. However, if you got Social Security, they can't garnish that. But they can do the second form of garnishment, which is to garnish your bank account. Whatever's in the bank account, 100% of it can be garnished at one time. And even though creditors that know you're on Social Security and have no reason to believe there's any other money in that bank account other than your Social Security income, they'll still garnish that bank account and make you go to court to get the judge to stop it. And it'll get wiped out in one whack. So if you have a bank account, you're vulnerable to being garnished and having everything in that account taken from you and given to a judgment creditor. The third thing that creditors can do is to take the judge's order to the probate judge's office where the real estate records are kept. And they will record that judgment in the probate judge's office, and that makes it a judgment lien that goes on your credit and gets stuck on any property that you got after that. And it could be real estate. You might be trying to refinance your house, and now all of a sudden you got to pay this judgment lien with this huge rate of interest on it. And maybe it started off as $3,000 and now it's $25,000. And you're wondering, how did it get there? I only borrowed $1,000. But it snowballs if you ignore it. The fourth thing that they can do, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that they can get the sheriff to sell your property. Now there's a limit on how much property you can protect from the sheriff. And those property limits are called exemptions. Alabama has exemptions that protect a certain amount of your property. For example, if your house is paid for, you can protect, at this time this video has been done, you can protect up to $15,500 worth of equity. But if your house is worth $40,000 and they're trying to collect on that judgment, even though you're on Social Security and even though they can't get in your bank account because you got smart and got one of those debit cards from Social Security, no matter what, if they can't get it the other ways, they can sell that house out from under you. I remember a case that happened where a lady was disabled and she owed a hospital bill that was 17 years old. Her mother died and she and her sister inherited this house. And 17 years later, the creditor got the sheriff to sell that house out from under her and kicked her out. It's disgusting what they'll do to people. And you need to take it seriously if you're watching this video. You may be vulnerable to that sort of thing. You're limited in how much personal property you can take. There's real estate, which means land and buildings, and there's personal property, which might mean your car's paid for, or something like that, and the sheriff might sell that. So you really need advice from an attorney to figure out how vulnerable you are to judgment creditors. But just remember, if you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter wants his money, he's got a lot of ways he can force you to pay him at some point. And the longer you put it off, the worse it gets. We highly recommend that if you're in that situation, you need to get in touch with an attorney that knows the law and knows what your options are and can explain that to you, because a lot of times there are a whole lot better options available to you than facing all that. The worst deal you can get is a 0% debt consolidation program called Chapter 13. And that's if you're paying them in full. In a lot of those cases, we don't pay them anything. But if we have to pay them in full for some reason, you're still getting 0% interest on it. And so you need to find out what your options are. It doesn't cost but $50 to get a Chapter 13 started. And it costs more to do a Chapter 7, but let the lawyer tell you what's better for you and let you figure it out and let you figure out what approach you're going to take. Again, I'm Chuck Grainger. For years, we've been helping people in the Montgomery area get out of the hole, and I thank you for your attention.